Hello, my name is Carl Surrey and this is a video tutorial for the Facebook group called Fans of Serif Software. Now yesterday I made a video showing how to sort of make this image here, which hopefully makes it look like a drawing on a blueprint paper background. I wasn't 100% happy with it, and I had a quick look around the internet and I did find a Photoshop tutorial which was better. The end result was better, but the way of doing it I couldn't work out how to get this sort of same result in Affinity Photo or in PhotoPlus. But I did sort of find a workaround, and this was the result I got. Hopefully this looks much more like a drawn image that's sort of partly been coloured in. So this version 2 of this blueprint tutorial will be trying to get this result rather than the result that I got on the previous video. It will cover a lot of the same ground, but it does extend what you can do with the image to get you to this end result. So let me shut these down, and I have the same car image and I have the same blue background image. I will add a link to the description for where you can get this background image, but as soon as we're going to be deleting a lot of it, theoretically you could use whatever you like. I just like to keep it because there is a sort of still a hint of this grid in the background, so it still gives you that hint of the image was being drawn. So the first thing I will do before I add the car to this image is I will add a pixel layer by clicking on this icon down here, and I'm going to fill that pixel layer with solid white. So I'm going to come to the flood fill tool. White is already the foreground colour. I'm just going to click in there and make that a solid white. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here on the right of this layer and drag it down below the background layer so it is hidden. So we will come back to that later on. So now we need to get the image that's going to go on the top. Now, like I said in the previous video, what you really need for here is a PNG image that's had all the background deleted, and if you haven't got one of those, you'll have to sort of find other tutorials where it tells you how to cut out an image and then save it as a PNG file without any background. So that is a totally different tutorial which I won't be going into here. So what we need to do once you've got your image is select all or Control and A, come to Edit, Copy or Control and C, and then come back to whichever background you are going to use, and then Edit and Paste or Control and V, which I've accidentally put below the background layer. Let me put it above the background layer. I should have highlighted the background layer before I copy and paste it. So, but it not really matters. You can if you do the same as me, you can just click and drag it to the top. So I'm going to need the Move tool for this layer to position it. Now, unlike the last one where I resized it, I'll leave this bigger because I'm going to be deleting a lot of the background, so it's not that important. So once we have that in place, I now need to make a duplicate of this layer, and to do that I can just right click this top layer, come down to duplicate, or you can use Control and J. So there we have our 4 layers now: the white, the coloured background, and then the 2 versions of the image here. Let me just get rid of the move tool a second so we're not having all these dots around. So this top layer is going to be the one we're going to convert into the pencil drawing, and this layer below it will be the one where we can bring back some of the colour to make it look like that you are colouring it in. Now it does help if you have a fairly colourful image. Obviously mine is mostly green, but probably the more colourful the better, because you want to bring back that hint of colour. So if you've got a white car, for example, it won't really make that much difference. So with the top layer highlighted, now what I did before is I came up to filters and we came to detect and used the detect. We will come back to that in a second, but the problem I thought I had with the previous video was there was still too much detail in the image, and the second Photoshop tutorial that I looked at sort of showed you a way to help lose some of that image, but as I couldn't recreate that in Affinity Photo, I had to find a different way. And what I found was if I come to the blur, filters, blur, and come to diffuse glow, we have all these various options, and it's a case of I fiddled around with some of these options. If I just try the threshold one, I'll move that up to 100, it sort of becomes sort of much sharper. If you come below, it starts to sort of go a bit hazy. So again, with the intensity, if I move it high, it becomes even more washed out and less colourful. And radius, if you go too high, it just becomes a bit too blurred. So you need to tinker around with these settings to try and find something that will give you sort of less detail but still allow you to know exactly, what the image was underneath. So I think I will leave it there, because probably every time I do this it will end up looking slightly different. But what I'm aiming for is sort of to have less details for the edge detector to find, so the end pencil image will be less detailed. So I'm going to click apply. So it was only affecting this top image because layer, because that is the one that was highlighted when I used it. So now we can come to the detect edges, and I will that's detect all edges. Let me do Control and Z and go back to and try horizontal edges, which I think is a bit less detailed than detecting all the edges. So what I now need to do is to make this a more black and white image, get rid of some of the colors, and to do that I'm going to use the adjustment layer of the hue, saturation and lightness, or HSL, and I'm just going to lose all of the color, and I'm going to click merge so it merges down to that layer that was on top, and then I need to come to layer and invert, so we now have a sort of less detailed image. And you could then fiddle around with the opacity to make it even fainter. Let me just try that and sort of have, let me hide this layer below because that's coming through at the moment. I'll just lower the opacity here. You could have like the grid slightly showing through this image to give it more of that this is drawn onto the paper type effect. And you could save it at this point and it would be very similar to the first video I made, but that's not the effect that I'm after. So I will reactivate this layer below, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a mask to this layer mask, and to do that you can click on this square icon with a black circle in it, and it will add the layer mask icon onto that layer. So what we're going to do now is we're going to paint black onto this layer mask. So we need the brush tool, and it should change automatically to black, but if you haven't got black as your foreground color, make it black. And you can come to a fairly big brush size. I've got mine set at 126.6, but fairly big, and an opacity of 11, 10, 11, 15, whatever, something like that. And I'm just going to click and drag, or just click around this image, and whichever color that you want to main color that you want to bring back in, click the most in that area like this. As this tie is like nearest to the eye of the person watching, I'm going to make this the most colorful and just bring back a hint of color to the green in the background, and even less of a color hint on this side, so that now looks like I've finished drawing whatever it was I was doing, and I'm now starting to color it in. How much you bring back or don't bring back, I will leave up to you and your personal image, but I'm going to leave that there. So you got the color from this layer showing through the layer mask of the layer above. So now to get rid of some of this blue in the background, you want to click and highlight on the background image or whichever image you are using for your background, and we are going to add a layer mask to this layer as well. Now in this case I'm going to raise the opacity up to around the 50ish mark. Now let's go to 40%. We've still got our brush tool selected, and black is still the color. So I'm just going to remove a lot of the color around the edges at this percentage. And so it doesn't matter whether you come over the car as such, because you're not removing anything from the car because they are on the layers above. We are just removing it from the layer mask on this background layer. So what I'll do is I'll reduce the opacity down again to the 10, 11 mark, and then I'll just more subtly come closer to the car and sort of help blend it into that background a bit. And I think I will leave it there. So that is the end of this Affinity Photo part of this tutorial. I will now try and do the same thing in PhotoPlus. I hope you like this result. It is different from the previous video, and I'm hoping it is different enough. So all you need to do now would be to merge your layers or export it and save it as a JPEG, and that would be all you need to do now. So I will now move on to the PhotoPlus part of this tutorial. See you in a second. Okay, moving on to the PhotoPlus part of this tutorial. I have loaded the same two images, the blue background and the car, and before I go ahead and move the car in, I'll need to add the white layer like I did in Affinity Photo. So we need to make a new layer, pixel layer. So this white square with a cross in it, click on that. Don't need to name it, but you can do if you want. And so we have a new blank layer there, and we need the flood fill, which you may have it set on gradient fill tool, but you can use this flyout menu to select the flood fill, or just press F on your keyboard. Make sure that white is your foreground color, so white is the upper of these two squares here. You can just click on this arrow here if they're already set on the black and white, and then just click and fill that layer. Let me come off of this flood fill tool a second. Now, whereas in Affinity Photo I just dragged the layer below the background, it is possible, but it is a bit more convoluted to try and do that in PhotoPlus. So what I will do is I will click on the bottom layer, right click and come to duplicate, and then I will drag this above the white layer. So really this background layer here is no longer needed, so I can just turn that off, and so we have our white behind the blue layer. So now I can import this PNG file. So much like before, select and select all, then edit, copy, and the keyboard shortcuts are the same, Control and C. Come back to the background image and then edit and then paste as a new layer, or Control and L. And I'll come to the move tool, just reposition it, and much like I just did in the Affinity Photo version, I'm not going to resize this one because I'm going to lose a lot of the background anyway. So I'm just going to center it pretty much by eye and leave it there, and then I'm going to right click this layer and duplicate that. So in theory I now have 5 layers, although only 4 of them are currently visible. So now we need to do the diffused glow part of this. Now in Affinity Photo, diffused glow is in the blur menu, but in PhotoPlus it is in the render menu. So click on that, and much like in Affinity Photo you have the 4 sliders, and you just need to move these around until you get a less detailed image than you would have without using this. So leave that opacity up at 100. Because the more sort of blurred it is, the less the edge detector will have to find when we use that. And once you're happy with the results, just click OK. And now we will use the edge detector. So we come to effects, then edge, and I'm going to again use, you can use the find all horizontal or vertical, but glowing edges, which is not an option I've found in Affinity Photo, but here in PhotoPlus it is an option, and you can use these sliders to lose even more of some of the detail to make it look even more like a drawing. So I found it, for my personal taste, that if you have the smoothness further to the right and the brightness further to the left, it does give you quite a good loss of some of the detail. So I will click OK there, and now I need to invert this selection. So in the adjustments, the last option here is invert, and this will invert everything, but what I'm going to do is to right click this and then click merge down, so it will then merge into the layer below it, not affecting the blue background. And now I need to also lose some of this color, so I will come to the hue saturation adjustment, lose all of the color from the image, and again I will right click this and click merge down, so again it is merged into this top layer rather than any of the layers below. So again, much like I said in Affinity Photo, at this point you're pretty much at where I was in the previous video. So you could save this as it stands now, but I want to bring back some of the color from the layer below, so I will now carry on and extend this tutorial a bit by adding the layer mask. So the layer mask icon in PhotoPlus is this one here, which is like a square with like a white shield in it. So making sure that the top layer is highlighted, just click on that and it will add the layer mask, and we are now going to paint black into that layer mask. So come to the paintbrush tool, make sure that black is your foreground color, and much like in the previous part of this video, I've got a soft brush and the size is quite big. Here I've got 1800. I will just increase the opacity a bit, and probably not as high as what I went in Affinity Photo. I'm putting this up around the 30% mark, and I'll just paint and click and paint over this image. Again, I'm going to bring more detail back to the point nearest to the eye here, and just bring back that hint of colour of the car. There's a bit more green in there, so I will leave that as it, so it looks like partly drawn, partly coloured in. So what I now want to do is come down to the background, copy rather than the background which has been hidden, and add a layer mask to that. So click on this here, so you now got a layer mask on this layer, and this layer is highlighted, and the layer mask is highlighted because it has the white line around it. Black is still the foreground colour, and we're still on the paintbrush tool. So now when I click, it will start to remove the blue background rather than anything else. It's not affecting anything else, so I'll just use this high opacity just to lose a lot of it from around the edges, and then I will lower the opacity back down to around the 10% mark, and then just come a bit closer and just lose a bit more, so there's sort of just a hint that that is got the blueprint paper behind it. So I think I will leave that there, and so all I would need to do now would be to merge the layers and save or export it as the finished result. So hopefully this is different enough for both the videos to exist. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.